The next type of operator we're going to look at for the mono class are the suppressing operators. And these are operators that create a mono that ignores its payload. What the heck is that about? It's a really curious semantic. So the particular method we're going to look at here, and there's other suppressing operators we'll look at later, is the then operator. And then is very simple. You can see it just has no parameters, returns a value. It returns a mono to void that only replays the complete and error signals from this mono. So in other words, it does not propagate a value at all. You might be asking yourself, what the heck is this about? Why would anybody do something like this? Well, it actually has a really good reason and very nice purpose. A data suppressing operator, and there's a bunch of them for both monos and fluxes, is designed to ignore its payload. So here's an example to illustrate this point. So in this particular example, we're going to use mono from callable to get a reduced big fraction from some unreduced fraction. We're then going to use the do-on-success action operator to log the reduced big fraction. We're then going to apply the map transforming operator to print, or to modify and transform the reduced big fraction that's improper into a mixed string. We're then going to use do-on-success again to log the mixed string. I kind of don't show that, but we'll look at that when we look at the code. So now we've reached the end. We've created ourselves a mono. We've printed out its initial value. We've modified it with map. We print out the modified value. And the last thing we do is we say .then. And what .then does is it returns an empty mono that we use with the async task barrier framework. Remember the async task barrier framework was the thing that we used to run all the code so there'd be a single place we could wait for all the operations to finish without having to worry about falling off the end of main before everything was done. Well, the then operator is an indicator to the async task framework that we are done with the computation. And the async task framework is going to wait, using that clever technique, the async task barrier framework. It's going to wait until all the computations are done before it will return. So it's basically a barrier synchronizer. And .then is used to tell that framework that we're finished. And therefore it can, when everybody's finished, then it can return. But this is a way to say, I'm finished, and it doesn't have to return any value. So any value related stuff occurs before .then, and .then indicates that we're finished. So basically that's what we're doing here. We're using the async task barrier in conjunction with .then in order to ensure that asynchronous computations don't cause the program to complete prematurely. The framework waits for all the computations to finish. This particular example is a synchronous computation because there is no asynchrony here, but you'll see when we slide in asynchrony later using the subscribe on operator that .then will continue to work without change as an indication that the asynchronous computation is done. Really, really subtle semantics, very, very cool semantics. RxJava, curiously enough, does not have a direct equivalent to .then. However, it does have something called a completable that can be used in a similar way in conjunction with single.ignore element. .ignore element is a method in the RxJava framework which will return a completable that will basically ignore the results and just say whether things succeeded or failed. So there is no equivalent to ignore element in Project Reactor. There's no equivalent to .then in single for RxJava, but they work in complementary ways, even though the signatures and the types are slightly different. Is that confusing? Yes, it is. And I'm not quite sure why they chose to do it different ways, but they did. So that's the end of the discussion of the first of several suppressing operators in the mono class that we're going to cover.